5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live. Has it been live? Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, welcome to our wonderful, savvy audience that wants to go beyond the usual blather that you hear from these insipid panels on the talk shows or podcasts or radio. We're trying to give you in-depth analysis based on actual research and historical depth.
You don't think the shows do real research? They probably do real research.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No, you don't think CNN does real research?
They probably do a little bit of research. Absolutely.
New York Times podcast does research?
A little bit, but it doesn't go beyond the surface. That's the problem. They don't really probe deeply into things. Let me give you an example. New York Times and at least 3 or 4 other outlets said, oh my God, MAGA is now rallying around Trump after the Wall Street Journal, that communist lunatic left rag, published an alleged lewd letter that Donald Trump sent to his buddy, Jeffrey Epstein. All of these outlets, guess what in-depth research they did, Sam?
On what exactly you talking
on
about?
This notion that the MAGA is now rallying around Trump after the Wall Street Journal article.
I'm guessing they were just pontificating about it.
No.
Oh, no, there was...
They looked to one guy, Steve Bannon.
Oh.
Yeah. All the same, as far as I could tell, all the outlets quoted Steve Bannon as if he knew everything that's going on in MAGA and as if that's real in-depth research. I'm not knocking the mainstream media. They do a lot of wonderful work. They do investigative reporting that obviously we can't do. We are not an investigative outlet. I'm really talking about, the panels you see, the superficial articles you see. You rarely get real historical depth, and there's way too much deference to Donald Trump, treating Donald Trump as though he were a normal politician, whitewashing and normalizing what Donald Trump does. And that's really frightening, because we're going to talk about something that Donald Trump has done that is as frightening as anything perhaps that Donald Trump has done. It's very hard.
Really?
It's very hard, to rank them because there are so many abysmal things. But this is really serious. Donald Trump is plunging us into the new dark ages.
Wow.
You know what the dark ages were, Sam?
They were ages that were dark.
Yeah. Hey, God, you're such a smart kid. You're right on top of it.
Thanks.
They were... period, it's hard to say exactly, but somewhere around the 5th century to the 11th, 10th, 12th century, the core period of the medieval era. And we're talking here about Europe. Things are quite different in China or the Islamic world. But these were for many years regarded as the dark ages of Europe. An era in which there was much less learning, scientific advances. Things were very much based upon superstition and ecclesiastical authority rather than a real probing of scientific research. The real scientific revolution would come much later. Now, I understand this always happens. Once you establish something, historians are going to push back. That's how they make their name, right? By being contrarian. So they just go along with everybody else. They're not going to make their name. And quite rightly, they have said, look, perhaps the idea of the Dark Ages is a little bit exaggerated.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, very people know that, but that's kind of the revisionist scholarship. I buy it a little bit, but I don't buy it entirely. Compared to the Renaissance and the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment that came later, the appellation of Dark Ages, while not obviously entirely accurate, is not entirely wrong. But for purposes of this discussion, we can presume that the appellation Dark Ages refers to a period of Western history in which scientific advances are, limited, and in which superstition, ecclesiastical decrees, rather than actual scientific investigation, informs people. This was the era of the Great Plagues that wiped out as much as half of Europe, as well as many other diseases. Life expectancy was about 30 years in these days. And really, the great scientific advances were very much yet to come. I never would have thought, and again, I'm using this metaphorically. I know you could push back and say maybe the Dark Ages weren't as dark as we think they were. And there's some truth to that, but not entirely. Dark Ages is not a bad metaphor. He's pushing us right back into the Dark Ages, Sam, by killing the scientific advances of the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. There are those who say, oh, Donald Trump is taking us back to 1950. No, he's taking us back to 950.
Wow.
950.
Whoa.
By essentially plunging us into darkness by abolishing scientific research that informs all of government policies and that is essential to protecting our lives, our health, our environment. If you don't do the scientific research, Sam, can you actually make enlightened good policy?
Probably not.
Absolutely not. You've blinked out the last many centuries of scientific advance and plunged us right back into a period where it was those who were in control who dictated what we think and what we believe, much to the detriment of all of us. That's exactly where Trump is taking us back. We're not going to do any real scientific research. We're not going to come up with real solutions based upon actual information and analysis. We are just like the kings and bishops and popes of the Dark Ages. We are going to operate on the dictates of those who rule, not on real advances. Let me give you a prime example that just happened, Sam.
Okay, give it to me.
The Environmental Protection Agency. Was it some lunatic left-winger who established the Environmental Protection Agency, Sam?
No.
No, you know who it was?
Nixon.
Nixon! It was a very conservative move. It used to be that conservatives believed in protecting and conserving our environment. What president, Sam, do you know, was the great pioneer of conservation?
Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt. And what party was he?
Republican.
A Republican. The Republicans are the ones, to a great extent, who have pushed forward our advances in conservation, in protection of our environment. This is not something, the lunatic left-wing Democrats, as Trump would have you believe. So what is the Environmental Protection Agency doing to make sure that we have enlightened policies based on the best information? Quote, according to news reports, they are planning to shutter, I repeat that, to shutter the agency's scientific research arm that provides expertise for environmental policies and regulations. The agency is closing, Sam, the Office of Research and Development, which analyzes dangers posed by a variety of hazards, including toxic chemicals, climate change, smog, wildfires, indoor air contaminants, water pollution, watershed destruction, and drinking water pollutions. This is
Donald Trump wants the cleanest air and the cleanest waters. Doesn't he always say that?
He always says that. And again, remember he said, don't believe what you see or read. Only believe what I tell you. So if I tell you that we have the cleanest air and water, even though we've shut down all research to document that, you have got to believe it. The office also manages grant programs that fund university and private companies in doing research. And we know that the administration has engaged in a war on essential private research, doing their best to cut the grants and shut it down, just as they have done with HHS, doing their best to shut down the research there. We're not going back to 1950, Sam. We're going back to 950.
No, I don't want to go back to 950.
You sure don't. When, plagues ravaged us, climate change ravaged people. The average life expectancy was 30 years for the average person. Life was nasty, brutish, and short. Only a few elites, enjoyed a really comfortable, commodious lifestyle. We're heading right back there by shutting down the knowledge, the information, the analysis that guides rational policy and protects us. And if you don't think we're in 1984, Sam, listen to how they justify it.
Okay,
you're not going to believe this.
Okay.
This is classic, war is peace, famine is plenty, hate is love. Under Trump's leadership, the EPA has taken a close look at our operations to ensure that the agency is better equipped than ever to deliver on our core mission of protecting human health and the environment while powering the great American comeback. This reduction in force will assure that we can better fulfill that mission. Is that war is peace? Is that as absurd as you've ever heard?
Honestly, it's not that absurd. It just feels like some boilerplate.
It's not boilerplate,
No?
Sam. Think about it. It's the exact opposite of what they're doing. What they're doing is shutting down our ability to deliver on the core mission of protecting human health and the environment. You can't protect human health and the environment when you don't have any reliable information, can you?
True.
So, again, they're telling us the exact opposite, 100 degrees in the other way of what they're actually doing. Don't believe what you see and hear with your own eyes. Only believe what we tell you. And we tell you cutting down our research and information on toxic chemicals, climate change, smog, wildfire, indoor air contaminants, water pollution, watershed destruction, and drinking water pollutions. Shutting down all the research on that makes us better equipped to deliver on our core mission of protecting human health and the environment. It's not just boilerplate.
I get what you're saying.
It's 1984 double think.
Right. They're telling us that we're going to have this beautiful, clean environment while at the same time cutting all the resources that help make our environment clean and safe, et cetera, et cetera.
And protect us from catastrophic climate change, which they've abolished. Even though 98% of scientists tell us, not 50%, not 60%, 98%, and the one or two who disagree tend to be associated with the fossil fuel industries. They tell us we're approaching the point of no return when it comes to catastrophic climate change. I remind you, in 2009, when the science was nowhere near as well developed, when the floods, the hurricanes, the wildfires, and the droughts were nowhere near as evident, a business person's letter to Barack Obama said, unless we do something immediate and drastic about climate change, the consequences for humanity and our planet are going to be catastrophic, and we can do this by actually improving the economy. Who signed that, Sam?
Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah, exactly. Donald Trump, Donald Jr., Ivanka Trump, Eric Trump. They knew 16 years ago, and this is the most cynical political ploy that puts every one of us in danger. Not back to 1950, friends, back to 950.
Ah!
Don't just take my word for it, although you don't really need much expertise to figure this out, do you, Sam? It's evident on its face. Here's Kyla Bennett, Director of Science Policy for the independent nonprofit Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. What they said, these cuts will, quote, not only cripple the EPA's ability to do its own research, but also to apply the research of other scientists. In other words, it has repercussions well beyond just the EPA. It will leave the EPA flying blind and unable to use the best science available, just as they didn't have the best science in 950 in Western Europe. These short-sighted cuts will ultimately affect every American. No one is safe from water, air pollution, contaminants, catastrophic climate change, except the very rich people like Donald Trump and his friends who can get their private water supply, move anywhere they want, have private security forces. But 99% of us are not going to be safe from what they're doing. And, the doublethink here is just astonishing. And, of course, the ones who hail this are the ones who have been accused of pollution. The American Chemistry Council. They love it. We support EPA evaluating its resources to ensure that American dollars are used efficiently and effectively. In other words, those who might be polluting our environment, our water, our air, with toxic chemicals, you're home free now. You don't have to worry. You're lauding and applauding this shutting down of research. And I remind you, it's not just the EPA. It's across the board. They are warring on science everywhere, in HHS, in the EPA, in other government agencies, and in private institutions like our great colleges and universities, the Smithsonian Institute, other museums. They are warring on knowledge.
You're just depressing me and making me sad now.
I know. I hate to say it's depressing, but we have a great counter in our new message, don't we, Sam?
Truth, not tyranny.
Truth, not tyranny. It's an explosive message.
Explosive.
And it's very much in line with what we've been saying, right? Truth. You can't get truth when you shut down research and analysis and information. And just like in 950, you rely on the decrees, the superstition, the interests of those in power. One of the most empowering things about the scientific revolution is that anyone can benefit from science, right? It's not limited to the elite, right? Everyone can advance their understanding, and when you are improving our health through medical research in cancer, improving our environment through all of this research that's shutting down, every single person benefits. But when you go back into the dark ages, just like back in 950, who benefits? Only the rich and the powerful, and absolutely nobody else. I'm sorry to make you depressed.
Yeah, how dare you?
But, I've been a professor for over 50 years. I've devoted my life to the search for truth. And as I've said many times, I've quoted the late, great social philosopher Hannah Arendt. Once you abolish truth, once you go back to the dark ages, then everything else falls apart, because there is no standard of judgment other than what the rich and the powerful, for their own interests, impose upon you. You think we're not in 1984? Well, we are. I just gave you the example. They tell you exactly the opposite. Not just boilerplate, but just the opposite. We're shutting down science so that we can better serve our mission of protecting the environment and climate change. That really is famine is plenty, war is peace. But I've got to go back to something else. It's not a throwback to 950, but it may be a throwback to 1950. What has Trump done with respect to the Washington football team?
Oh, God. He's asking for us to go back to the Redskins?
Back to the Redskins.
Can't we just move on from this? Jeez
Unbelievable.
Louise.
What business does he have interfering with the Washington Football Club? No. Are they part of the government?
Of course not.
Do they get grants from Trump?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Well, there's this idea of building a stadium.
But that's state and local. Oh, that's a D.C.
Yeah, which is the federal. And he's holding that over their head. If you don't go back to calling yourself the Redskins, I'm not going to authorize this stadium. Using the power of government in a way we have never seen before to bully private institutions. Not just the Smithsonian, not just other museums, not just law firms, not just our great colleges and universities. He's now belly flopping in for no reason into sports, trying to bully a private football team into a retrograde name that they abolished precisely for that reason.
I'm sorry, that name is racist, period.
It is racist.
There's no come on.
No, if you know anything about the history.
You don't even need to know anything about history.
I don't need to know anything, I know.
Calling a team name based off of a dumbed down color of a people's skin. Might as well call them the
Washington Ends, or the Washington Kikes, or the Washington Spics. It's the same thing. The term Redskin historically was used by those who wanted to wipe out and exterminate Native Americans, indigenous people, as standing in the path of white Christian settlement of the continent. It was not a positive term. It was a negative, pejorative, nasty term associated with Indian removal and Indian extermination historically. And you don't have to take my word for it. Back when this was being considered, there was polling. And Trump says, all the Native Americans wanted to go back. Just like he says he got 90% approval for the debate that he got thrashed. At any rate, there was a poll on this. And guess what? 57% of those who strongly identify with being Native American were opposed to the name, as compared to a very small percentage who supported it. 67%, Sam, of those who frequently engage in tribal cultural practices were found to be deeply insulted by characters of Native American culture. He wants to go back to the day when white Americans can lord it over any minorities who didn't count, weren't, equal peoples. We saw the same thing with his returning bases to Confederate names. Can you imagine celebrating the Confederacy? Confederates are a bunch of traitors.
It's all about their anti-woke, pro-white agenda.
It's white nationalism. The head of one of the most important organizations, the Office of Management and Budget, maybe one of the top 4 or 5 offices in the country, is an avowed white nationalist. He said so in a tape that was recorded. And he was a major author of Project 2025. They really want to go back. It's not even 1950. It may be 1850, to the era of Indian removal, Indian massacres, Indian exterminations. And same thing. They want to celebrate traitors who had no other reason for seceding from the Union than to maintain slavery. One of the biggest myths and worst myths is that the South left the Union to preserve states' rights. Exactly the opposite is true. Read the Confederate Constitution. sure you haven't. Most people
No,
haven't.
hell no.
But you should. I have.
Oh, I should?
And how much states' rights on slavery was there in the Confederate Constitution? I'm
None.
sure. Zero. Just the opposite. States had no authority to do anything whatsoever to interfere with the institution of slavery. It was a constitution that was much less favorable to states' rights than the United States Constitution. The Confederate States of America were devoted to one thing and one thing only, and that was the preservation of horrific human bondage. And we see it not only with Donald Trump, we saw it in Project 1776. We see it in some of the new curricula that is coming out in states like North Carolina, trying to play down the evils of slavery and play down the way in which the Confederates were traitors, fighting in per capita by far the bloodiest war in U.S. history for the sole purpose of preserving and protecting slavery. And, not naming bases after traitors and slavers is not erasing history. You can still study the Civil War and the Confederacy. Just means you don't celebrate traitors. You don't celebrate those who shed blood in order to maintain the bondage of other human beings. Just like in Germany, you don't celebrate the Nazis. That doesn't mean you can't study the Nazis. We study the Nazis all the time. We study the Civil War all the time. We study the Confederacy all the time. But what we should not be doing, and this is what Trump wants us to do in pursuit of the white nationalist agenda, was celebrate the Confederacy, celebrate the era of Indian removal and Indian extermination, eliminate the advances of the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, plunge us back into a new form of the Dark Ages. It's really, really frightening. And, again, the media has done a decent job on this, but not really put it in historical perspective and really explaining to us just how horrific this is for every American and really people all over the world, because America's the trendsetter.
All right, anything else on your mind? You want to get to questions?
There's a lot on my mind, but, I just want to mention
mention it then.
More and more defeats for Donald Trump in the courts. By better than 2-1, he's lost in the courts. Unfortunately, in a number of instances, the Supreme Court has bailed him out, at least temporarily, but it looks like there's going to be a permanent nationwide injunction against Donald Trump's attempt to rewrite the Constitution and claim that, in contradiction to the 14th Amendment, that children of undocumented immigrants born in the U.S. are not U.S. citizens, even though the conservative court back in 1898 ruled just the opposite. And supposedly conservatives are strict constructionists, right? They say just stick to the plain meaning of the Constitution. And the plain meaning is, yes, those born in the U.S. with, as the court pointed out, some minor exceptions like diplomats and soldiers in an invading army are U.S. citizens. Donald Trump said, it's only for the babies of slaves. That 1898 case did not involve the babies of slaves. It involved the children of Chinese immigrants who, under the law, could not themselves be citizens because the Citizenship Act limited naturalized citizenship to white people and people of African descent. Asian people were excluded. So the critical Supreme Court case had nothing to do with the babies of slaves, nor does the amendment say that. If that's what they wanted, they certainly could have said it. And as far as people being here illegally and not having their children be citizens, history shows just the opposite. In 1807, the federal government banned the slave trade. international, not internal. It went into effect in 1808, and guess what, Sam? Thousands of slaves were brought here illegally. They were illegal presence in the United States. And as soon as the 14th Amendment was passed, guess what the status of their children was?
Citizens.
They were all citizens, and nobody objected. So history shows Trump is wrong in saying it was limited only to the children of babies, and wrong in saying it doesn't cover those who did not have a legal presence here. Again, you hear it here. You're not going to get much of this in-depth analysis anywhere else.
All right. With that, let's get to some questions. You all right?
Yeah, my shoulder's hurting. Can you open my drink?
Well, where was I at? Oh, we're getting to questions. But before we do that, let's do some housekeeping.
That's always important.
If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you know we're live. We only have 431 likes. Let's get those likes up. It helps us a lot in the algorithm. Remember that donations and members get priority on questions.
Yes, we really need the donations and memberships. And remind them, if they want information on climate change, they should go to your brilliant mother's website. Remind them of what it is. I never get it right.
Savannah will put it in the chat.
Okay.
Our first question is from RM Bells. They say, from what I've seen, the professor likes his soda. Aren't you happy about the U.S. Mexican Coca-Cola development? I prefer Coke without high fructose corn syrup myself.
I don't drink Coke with high fructose corn syrup.
Right. Well, they said the regular Coke now, they're going to change back to being cane sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup.
I'm not enough of an expert to comment on that. Do you know anything about it? I only drink diet, so I never look into that.
He's a diet soda drinker.
But I've seen, and I'm not a scientist of these elements, but I've seen mixed reviews about that. Some saying it's a good thing, some saying it's just cosmetic.
I think high sugar sodas are bad for you, probably.
Period.
No matter what. So
no better, right. That's what a lot of the articles have said. But I'm not the expert on that.
Philip H., our good friend, says
very good friend.
The Heartland Institute is a climate change denial think tank, and some of the same backers that, quote, tobacco causing cancer think tanks employ.
Yes, for decades the tobacco companies.
Look how you gotta move. Look at this, guys. Look how much he crowd. You gotta move your elbow. I'm like,
oh,
there you go.
How's that?
That's better. Thank you.
For decades the tobacco industry was pulling a vast hoax on us, claiming that there was no relationship between smoking cigarettes and cancer. Again, it's just like what we're seeing now. Denying science. Those who are rich and powerful trying to impose their own views on this. And absolutely, we're seeing the same thing with some of these think tanks, which go contrary to the overwhelming, and I don't mean 50, 60, 70, I mean close to 100% findings of scientists who publish in peer review publications.
Now that Trump has taken over the Republican Party, where do you think that leaves moderate conservatives going in future elections? Do you think that they support the Democratic nominees or just sit out future elections?
Samuel, where are those moderate Republicans? I've been looking all over for them, and I can't find them.
They're like the dinosaurs. They're a dying breed.
They're a dying breed. One of the big points, is my book here?
Your book's here.
One of the big points of my book, which is going to be out soon, September 1st, but you can pre-order on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or Abe Books or the University of Notre Dame website. One of the big points I make is not just Trump. It's the entire conservative movement. It's not like Trump is bullying them into doing things. Yes, he's a bully, but they're going along because they agree with him. Trump got a bigger vote from conservatives than any president in U.S. history, including, imagine this, the great conservative icon. Who was that, Sam? What president is the great conservative icon?
Reagan.
Reagan. He got more conservative support than Ronald Reagan. Reagan had a lot of Reagan Democrats. They helped him push forward his Reaganomics program. It's very hard to find Trump Democrats or even moderate Republicans anymore.
Where did they go? They just turned into MAGA, or they just turned in, like, where they didn't disappear?
Read my book. They have been in decline for a very, very long time.
Right.
And the real history of the conservative movement is very much in line with MAGA.
Right.
There have been periods, back and forth, but the great thrust of conservatism has led us exactly to where we are. Donald Trump is not hijacking conservatism. He is the culmination of conservatism. I prove that in my book. Check out the review in Library Journal, which, points to this finding and says highly recommended for anyone interested in American politics and history.
Gotcha. Peggy Cox says, Professor, Bondi's assistant is going to meet with Maxwell. I don't think it's her assistant. I think it's the assistant attorney general.
Yeah, it's not her assistant.
Yeah. Normally, the top prosecutor, who was Comey, would be one to meet with Maxwell, but Bondi fired her. Oh, maybe it is her assistant. I don't know.
I don't think it is. But
anyways, looks like a deal for Maxwell to get out of prison by a presidential pardon if she cooperates with Bondi. Do you think the public will ever get to see the real unaltered Epstein files? How can we make that happen?
If you think we're going to get the real unaltered, and kind of the word Epstein files is a little misleading. All of the Epstein information, and it is voluminous. It's vast. There is a trove of information, and only a fraction of it is in the grand jury. They're trying to get the grand jury transcripts released. That's going to be the biggest bust since they released the Kennedy information and the MLK Jr. information, none of which added anything to anything but just were big distractions. The release of grand jury information focuses on Epstein and his crimes. It doesn't go into all of those who are otherwise involved with Epstein. We need a much bigger revelation. And Democrats in Congress seem to be doing a pretty good job of pushing for a vote on it. But I got to tell you, it's not going to happen. Republicans may say, as they said, about so many other things, like the big, beautiful bill or Hegseth or RFK Jr. We're concerned. We have all these problems. And in the end, what do?
Diddly.
They cave. And I think they're going to cave on Epstein. If you think that Pam Bondi, who clearly has allegiance to Trump, not to the Constitution or the American people, is going to release anything incriminating about Trump, then I have a big bridge, Sam.
Oh, quiet.
In my hometown of Brooklyn.
You need a new cliche, man. You overused that one.
It's a good one.
It was a good one for the first 5,000 times. Now it's kind of
Hey, we have different audiences.
Oh, okay. Jordan Shepard says, some argue that millions of progressive voters sit out elections unless a candidate like Bernie Sanders or AOC is nominated, refusing to support moderates, even if it means a Republican win. Is there any data to actually support this idea? I'd also be interested in your thoughts on the theory itself.
There is some data to support that. We talked about this, Sam. One of the big issues was Democrats sitting home. They weren't inspired by the Harris-Waltz campaign. And we saw quite the opposite with the very progressive Mondami in New York. He inspired a great turnout of progressives, of young people, enormous volunteers. And as I've said many times, I don't agree with everything that he stands for. You don't have to. Democrats should not be running and hiding and fretting and nervous. Their response proves what, Sam, that we've been saying forever.
Spineless.
Learn from him. Learn how he inspires volunteers, and young people. You don't have to agree with everything that he stands for to learn from him and emulate the good things that he did in his campaign that we haven't seen other Democrats doing it. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a far leftist to do this. I do think it's quite possible, like Governor Beshear, in a very red state. I think he has the personality, the style, the courage to inspire people, even though his positions are not as far left as Mondami's.
You're back. I just want people to see. So my chair ends here. My chair rest ends here. So my elbow is like 2 inches back. Yours is like 5 inches. I just want people to know what's happening here. People always give me shit. They love you. It's like, you don't know what happens behind the scenes, guys. He's elbowing me the entire episode.
I don't think I elbowed you once.
Let's go back to the tape. Why are conservative Catholics and evangelicals alike prone to put big business over Mother Earth? I'm aware it's in your book, but as a Catholic under religious vows, this baffles me.
It baffles me too. I have a whole chapter on this showing how evangelicals, whether Catholic or Protestant, and we've talked about this before, take the far fringes of biblical teaching. Abortion, transgender, homosexuality, which is almost non-existent in Christian or Judaic teaching, and instead pass over the vast majority of such teaching, which focuses on greed and wealth and truth-telling and caring for the poor and the vulnerable and the sojourner among us. Mike Johnson says, pick up a Bible and that'll explain my policies. No, pick up a Bible and it'll explain how badly you distort Christian and Judaic principles in your interest. It is in their interest to interpret Judeo-Christian teaching in this extraordinarily narrow, cramped, distorted way. I throw out the question in my book. You ready? When have these evangelicals ever taken a moral position that goes against their interests?
Never.
Never.
The thing that I don't really understand is how have evangelical Christians in this nation sort of hijacked Christianity? Because like you said, it's not like their reading of the Bible is one interpretation, right? Even within Christianity, there are so many sects and denominations that interpret Christianity differently. Individuals interpret the Bible differently. How did it come to be that evangelicals got this like hall pass of like, oh, no, the way we interpret it, we're the true Christians, we're the, textualist. That seems all BS to me, right?
It's all BS. It's all part of their interest. And how did they come to do this? Number one, they are much more outgoing, political, than the more moderate, mainstream Christian denominations. And they allied themselves with the conservative movement in a way that more progressive interpretations, as I point out in my book, like those of the social gospel, did not align themselves in the same way with political movements. Also, who runs these conservative organizations? The Catholic Church, the Southern Baptist Association, by far the two biggest. Who runs them? Is it women?
No.
It's run exclusively by men. In the Catholic Church, women can't even be priests, much less bishops, cardinals, or pope. In the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination, the most important evangelical, women can't even be pastors of churches. So by taking this fringe interpretation of the Bible, they do two things. Number one, they sustain their power. They sustain male control over these institutions. And number two, they whitewash all the ways in which these institutions have been involved in horrendous sexual abuse. I'm not even going to mention what goes on in the Catholic Church. That's so well known, you don't need me to remind you. But most of you don't know that one of the worst sex scandals was in the Southern Baptist Convention. It was found that they were rife with sexual abuse and covering it up, just like the Catholic Church covered it up.
Good analysis, Dad.
Thank you.
Does your shoulder, this shoulder doesn't hurt, right?
No, my right shoulder
So as long
hurts.
as you keep your microphone in this hand, you're good, right? Mm-hmm. 'Cause I don't want you to adjust and then hurt your shoulder. You know?
I'm all right.
Okay, you're all right.
I do have a bad shoulder. But Thursday, your incredible mom, number 21 in the world in her division in the CrossFit Open, and I both are going to compete in the Senior National Olympics. Karen Strickler in swimming, and myself in the 800 and 1500 meter runs.
Nice.
And she's, of course, in a way younger age group.
What would be the end result of dismantling our government and democracy? What are they trying to accomplish? And in the end, who benefits?
Who always benefits when you undermine democracy and freedom, Sam?
People in power, the people who have the money.
Exactly. You know, there's an old saying, the golden rule of politics is whoever has the gold rules. You undermine democracy, you undermine the power of the people. You turn us into Russia. Who has the power in Russia? The ordinary people?
No.
No. If they even dare to dissent, they can be killed, they can be imprisoned. It's Vladimir Putin, who some say is worth hundreds of billions, while his own people are suffering economically, and the oligarchs around him. They're the ones who benefit from the lack of democracy, the lack of freedom. You can look at any dictatorship across the history of the world. It's never the ordinary people that benefit. It's those with the wealth and the power. And they want to cancel out, of course, the ability of the ordinary people to check them.
Last week, RFK Jr. announced with bipartisan support the rollout for psychedelic therapy to combat mental illness. Do you have an opinion on this?
I'm not, a physician. I'm not an expert. I will tell you I'm skeptical of everything that comes out of RFK Jr.
Everything?
Everything. This guy is known for quack science, fringe views. He has really dismantled a lot of the critical infrastructure and research of HHS. So anything that comes from him, I'm skeptical of.
I don't know. I've heard some decent research into psychedelics.
I don't know. I can't answer that. Neither you or I are expert in that.
True.
But I just want to say I'm skeptical of anything that comes out of that guy.
Okay. Omar Fateh, a Democratic Socialist candidate for mayor of Minneapolis, just won the endorsement of the city's Dem Party over the weekend. Couple this with Zohran Mamdani's win in New York. Do you think these are signs of a sea change in the Dem base?
Absolutely. Who's inspiring the Democrats? Is it Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer?
Not anymore.
I think Chuck Schumer's approval rating is in the 20% range. It's the strong voices. It doesn't have to be on the far left. I'm a big fan of Andy Beshear, who's a strong voice, but he's a more moderate. But it is the AOCs, the Bernie Sanders, the Mamdamis, this guy in Minneapolis who just got the Democratic endorsement. I think the grassroots of the Democratic Party are sending a big message to the tired, old, spineless Democratic elite, right? Change your ways. One of my favorite songs is Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Ghost Riders in the Sky. That one?
Yeah, and one of the big messages is, cowboy, mend your ways. Democrats, mend your ways. Don't keep going the way you are. While Trump's approval is plummeting, the Democrats have hit, I believe, either the lowest or one of the lowest approval ratings in the history of the party.
Professor Lichtman, is it not time for former President Obama to come out and talk about this criminal accusation by Trump? While working for UN 2000-9, I studied world dictators. You give them an inch and they take 10 feet. I think she's talking about Tulsi Gabbard's report that...
I got it, yeah.
That,
when they want to prosecute Obama?
Well, Tulsi Gabbard came out last week, at the end of last week, or maybe even this weekend, saying that, like, Obama and his administration... I forgot exact her claim.
Doctored the
Russia intelligence.
And should be prosecuted 10 years. Let me say this. There was no doctoring. The Russians massively interfered on behalf of Donald Trump in the 2016 election. If you don't want to take the word of the Mueller report, I'm very critical of the Mueller report, but in its near 500 pages, it documents beyond doubt that the Russians massively interfered on behalf of Donald Trump. It doesn't document a criminal conspiracy, but that's not the point. That was sustained by the intelligence community under Obama and by the intelligence community under what other president, Sam? Trump. And by Trump's then head of national intelligence, a vastly more qualified, more experienced individual, Dan Coates, I think he was a former senator, said, yeah, absolutely, we've confirmed it. If you don't believe all of that, look at the bipartisan support of the Senate committee investigating. We're not talking about Democrats. We're talking about a report signed off by both Republicans and Democrats that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, establish massive Russian interference. When you say, Russia wasn't interfering, that was doctored, into whose hands are you playing? The Russians. That's the Russian propaganda line. You don't believe me? Believe Fiona Hill. You know who Fiona Hill was, Sam?
She's a Russia expert.
Yes. For what president?
Trump.
She was his leading Russia expert, maybe the leading Russia expert in the world. And she made crystal clear that all of this debunking of the Russian interference is the line pursued by the Russian intelligence agencies. It's Russian propaganda. Like so much else that comes out of this administration, there is not a drop of truth to it. In fact, once again, the opposite is true. You know what I criticized Obama for in the 2016 campaign? For being biased against Donald Trump? Just the opposite. He never spoke out on what the intelligence community found. Never spoke out on how the Russians were meddling in our elections. And this is not the first time that has happened, by the way. Way back in 1960, the Russians tried to interfere in our election on behalf of Adlai Stevenson, who said, no way am I going to let you do this. Absolutely not. And there have been other instances when the Russians have tried to interfere, and they've been entirely rebuffed, except when you got to Trump. The FBI told the Trump campaign, if there are any contacts with the Russians, you need to report it to the FBI. Well, there were documented well over 100 contacts with the Russians, compared to 0 for the Hillary Clinton campaign. And how many reports did the Trump campaign give to the FBI, Sam? Come on, you can guess. 0. Not one. They welcomed, whether or not there was a conspiracy, they welcomed the Russian interference on their behalf. Moreover, it was well documented that the Trump campaign chair, Paul Manafort, was sharing sensitive campaign information with Konstantin Klemenuk, one of his old colleagues from Ukraine, pro-Russian when he was working for the pro-Russians in Ukraine, who was then associated with Russian intelligence. So this whole thing is a complete red herring. There's not a drop of truth to it. And why do you think they're doing it right now, Sam?
Distract from Epstein.
Distract, deflect, delay, obstruct. That's what they're really good at.
I want to be clear. Obama did, this question says, why isn't Obama coming out and talking about this? He actually did. Obama spokesperson said, these bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at a distraction. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but not successfully manipulate any votes. So,
is that Obama himself or a spokesperson?
A spokesperson.
Yeah, so I think the questioner is
why
right.
hasn't Obama?
It's quite different for Obama himself to come out.
Yeah.
I love Obama. I'd met with him and talked with him even before he was a presidential candidate. I think he was an excellent president, but abysmal when it came to party building, abysmal when it came to combating Republicans and building up the Democrats. Every election that didn't have him in it was a disaster. 2010, wipeout. Midterms. 2014, wipeout. 2016, Republican gets elected. And Republicans do well elsewhere.
It is an interesting question, though, about how much you want folks like Obama, Biden, maybe even W. Bush to come out. Because on one hand, you don't want them coming out every time Trump says something ridiculous about them, because he says something ridiculous about them every other day, right? So it's kind of ridiculous to expect him to come out and combat him. Hold on, let me finish my thought.
Sure.
But at the same time, I kind of agree with Jay Melwa, our questioner here, that we've seen over the last almost 10 years now of the American right wing and MAGA and Trump just pushing this stuff until at a certain point it seems like people are actually starting to really believe it. And on social media, on the internet, these lies travel 1,000 miles a minute. And when these other leaders, Obama, Biden, whoever, don't come out and say something, it seems like eventually these crazy ideas actually become entrenched into Americans' minds,
I will give you a couple of appellations here. Gish Gallop. You deny that was a real thing, but it is.
I don't deny it anymore.
Okay. It means you're giving, as you say, you're right on. Just a cascade of lies. So many, so often, so damning, you can't keep up with them. Even, people like us who follow this, who have, programs on it, we can't keep up with all the lies that come out. Second point, and I've mentioned this before, it's also in my book, The Big Lie. This has been a staple of dictatorships throughout the modern era. Say something often enough and loudly enough, even if it has no basis in fact, people will come to believe it.
Right, but I guess you're not really answering the core question. Like, when do you think it's time for people like Obama or whoever it might be or other leaders to come out and combat some of this stuff?
They've got to.
Right. And
I believe in calling people out. I think when you let it slide, the big lie takes hold. It's when you challenge the big lie. That's why they want to abolish science and research and subvert our educational institutions. They don't want anyone thinking for themselves. They want people just buying the lies and the propaganda coming out of the administration. I've mentioned this many times, the wonderful book Spin Doctors, which explains that modern dictators, yes, they do use brutality, but more than anything else, they use control over ideas and information.
The other strange thing about this Tulsi Gabbard report is, when it first came out, I tried to do a little research into it and see, how much truth there was to it, what exactly it was. And I can't seem to find answers anywhere about what this document, I haven't personally seen the document or read the document, but I haven't seen anywhere any even far-right outlets reporting exactly what this document said. In fact, this Fox News article that I was reading for this Obama statement, I was reading through it, and never in the article do they actually say what this document says.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the Epstein files, I'm sure. There's no document. It's all made up.
You think so?
It's all fabricated.
It's literally all just nonsense?
It's all just, as we say in Yiddish, Narishkeit, nonsense.
So the document's not even public? We're just supposed to take Tulsi's word for it?
Don't believe what you see and hear, only believe what we tell you.
Right.
That's the watchword of this
I guess
administration.
I assumed at first that this was some sort of document that she was making public and we were all going to be able to see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where I got confused, and maybe that's where I'm confused. I was searching around. I was like, I don't see anywhere that says what this document actually says. I see Tulsi Gabbard saying a lot of stuff. I see a lot of right-wing pundits being like, oh my God, clutching their pearls about it. But I haven't actually read what this document concretely says.
This document, don't even call it this document, this fabrication. This goes way back to the early 1950s. Do you remember or read about Senator Joseph McCarthy?
Yes.
The notorious red baiter whose lawyer Donald Trump used, Roy Cohn. Well, McCarthy became famous for saying, I have here in my hand a list of, dozens upon dozens of card-carrying communists who are in our State Department. Anyone actually ever see that list?
I'm assuming no.
Of course not. This is a time-honored technique on the part of the far right.
I see. Gotcha. Axel Moreno says, I wanted to ask what your thoughts were on Elmo's X account being hacked and talking about the release of the Epstein files.
I'm not aware of the Elmo X account being hacked. Maybe you're more up on it than I am, Sam.
No, not really. How did Fidel Castro maintain political power in Cuba for nearly 5 decades, despite international pressure, economic hardship, and internal dissent?
How does any dictator maintain power? He controls the communications. He controls the army, the police. Very difficult, even though there is internal dissent. A lot of the dissenters fled the famous Mariel boat migration to southern Florida. And there were all kinds of crazy American attempts to get rid of Castro. First, there was the Bay of Pigs invasion very early in the Kennedy administration. An absolute unmitigated disaster. They thought they could land, 12 to 1,500 ragtag exiles on the shores of Cuba, and that this would spark an internal revolution. Of course, Castro's well-seasoned, vastly outnumbering troops captured them, killed a few, but mostly captured them. It was a big blot on the United States and only strengthened the Castro regime. Kennedy actually admitted it was a huge mistake, and he took responsibility for it. And a later review said this whole operation was poorly planned, poorly understood, disaster even before it started. They didn't stop. Then they had Operation Mongoose, in which they tried to assassinate Castro with crazy things like an exploding cigar or a poisoned starfish or poisoned his wetsuit when he went diving. Of course, none of that worked. And then the Cuban Missile Crisis and the big concession the United States made in the negotiation with Russia was an agreement not to invade Cuba, not to topple the Castro regime. So he benefited both from his tight control over Cuba. You see the same thing in North Korea and China. They've had authoritarian regimes even longer than Cuba. And all of this misguided attempts to overthrow the regime or dispatch Castro.
All right, we are actually 5 minutes past 10 o'clock.
Wow, that's when you're having fun, time's flips
I was
by.
about to say the same thing.
Oh, you're a smart kid.
Do you want one more question, or are you done?
One more.
All right, this is from Kathy Lubbins. She says, Professor, what do you think about Professor, what do you think the midterms will look like? I understand there will be gerrymandering.
Yeah.
There's always gerrymandering.
It's like that, movie Casablanca. Gambling? Well, I'm shocked that there's gambling going on. Gerrymander has been going on forever. Republicans are much more ruthless, much better at doing it. They're talking about gerrymandering Texas to virtually guarantee, overwhelming, like 80% Republican control of congressional districts. I don't know if they can do it, but they're not hiding it. They're not disguising it. I'm worried about gerrymandering. I'm worried about Donald Trump meddling in the 2026 elections, but I've also seen something very positive in some of the recent data. That is, 70% of Democrats are very enthusiastic about voting in the midterms. Quite different from what we saw in 2024, compared to only 50% or so of Republicans. That's one of the biggest gaps in enthusiasm we've ever seen.
But Democrats do gerrymander as well.
Of course, they're just not as ruthless or as good at it.
Right. All right, with that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. The good news is Lichtman Live post show comes up right after this on my channel. Beep, beep, beep. Dad, what are your final words to the people?
Truth, not tyranny. Truth, not tyranny. That says it all. The two are polar opposites. If you have truth, it's very hard to have tyranny. If you have tyranny, truth is the first casualty.
Very well said, Dad.
Thank you.
And your elbow is back into full. No, we're far enough away. You can keep it out. You can keep it out. Keep it out.
I'm good. I don't need to put it out there.
Okay. This has been the great elbow war of the Lichtman Live.
Right.
era.
The next show will be from the Senior Olympics. Be sure to tune in on Thursday. We'll be in Des Moines.
TNT.
Not Sam. He's
Truth,
too young.
Not tyranny.
Truth, not tyranny. It's a great slogan.
Yeah, I am not in the Senior Olympics.
No, not hardly.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
See you all on the Lichtman Live post show.